Okay, so what we're going to do is I'll just load up the photo and show you. Oops, no, not that one. Right. So we're going to be adding a sort of futuristic-y kind of Blade Runner-y, I guess, sort of building, megastructure building into this. We're going to be using techniques of drawing shapes and filling them with gradients. Then we're going to be using various sort of photo bashing techniques where we either flat out kind of overlay images that we've found, or we use a technique where we convert an image into a selection and then we can kind of paint in detail where we need it. We're also going to be adding in sort of little twinkling lights, or they won't be twinkling this because it's not actually animated. So it's going to be covering a whole bunch of sort of little techniques that hopefully will come in useful later when you're doing your own stuff, because I imagine a fair few will be doing sort of futuristic city kind of things, but this also could work for any other kind of architectural kind of detail as well. It's more of a demo of the some of the techniques and some of the procedures. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do with this picture, even though this is a relatively large picture of Frankfurt in this case, I'm going to increase the size of it, because when we're painting in the detail, we're going to run into the problem of it not being high enough resolution. So I'm not going to do anything fancy here. All I'm going to do is make this twice as big. We're going to, obviously the picture will become a little bit softer, but I'm not too fussed about the rest of the picture. I'm fussed about what we actually do into the picture. Okay. So this image is now, let's just check. Yeah, it's more of a kind of 4K kind of resolution, which is cool. So I'm going to put in some kind of building just here, and as I said, I'm going to try and keep this to under an hour. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new layer, use the marquee selection tool. I'm going to set a feather of 1, just because I don't want it to be completely crisp and sharp. And now I'm going to draw out just the rough kind of shapes that I want this kind of structure to be. And I'm just using the normal rectangular marquee tool to do this at the moment, set to sort of additive, so each time I do it the mask is getting a bit bigger. So not really worried about perspective or anything like that at the moment. I'm going to draw out some big shapes and then kind of overlap them. Have some things kind of jutting out the side. And maybe some dangling kind of stuff as well. Maybe connect that stuff up. Add some bits to the roof. I might also cut into the shape as well. And also switch to the polygonal tool and kind of take some of the, subtract some of the sort of hard right angles and make them more sort of 45-degree angles. Like that, and let's do it on here as well. Nope. Keyboard is a little bit wonky on this one. Okay, so maybe that's going to be roughly my kind of shape, which is actually I'm going to just adjust that. I'm going to transform the selection. I think it's just a bit too sort of wide. I want it a bit thinner. So yeah, something a bit more like that. Okay. Right, now I've done this all on a layer here. I'm going to try and be roughly organized. I'm going to rename this structure. We're going to fill this with 2 gradients. Let's go over to here. Make sure our gradient is set to normal. Yep, that's good. Oh, we don't want it as a radial. I want it as a linear gradient. Go to the gradient, and I want the preset foreground to transparent. And the colours I'm going to use are the base of the building. And for this one, I'm just going to choose the base of the building again. So I've got two colours here. Well, they're the same colour, but it's going to be fading out to transparent. Now, holding Shift, I can do a straight gradient up. Just kind of fill that up like that. But I just might have to do it a couple of times to find the right kind of... oh, I'm going to hide the marching ants kind of thing, so Control H. Yeah, that looks all right. Now, what happens with massive tall buildings is that the base of them are going to be more sitting in the smog and the fog and the atmosphere. And if they're super tall, like this one, they're going to end up poking out of the top of the sort of the thicker pollution kind of atmosphere. So what we can do is, for the top part of the building, we're just going to darken our colour a little bit. And again, so this time I'm going to drag the gradient down from that angle to get something like that. Because, let's try again. It takes a bit of messing around to find the right kind of level, but yeah. So the top part of the building is going to be darker than the bottom part. So we've got our kind of main structure set out here, our silhouette of what this building is going to look like. Now I'm going to add some texture into there that will add into the shadow details. Now, when you're doing high-tech stuff, when you're doing futuristic stuff, you want to look for reference imagery that's going to give you some textures. And I think you can't go wrong with aircraft carriers and oil refineries. Start building up a reference library of stuff like that. Well, I mean, at one point you're probably going to have to do either a contemporary picture or a futuristic picture. So you are going to need some kind of details. And yeah, aircraft carriers and oil refineries are great. There's lots and lots and lots of that stuff on the net. So this is a decent one. It's got lots of nice detail. We can use this for stuff. But first of all, I want to get rid of these people. Now, even though they would end up being extremely tiny in the final kind of picture, I still don't want to run the risk of people being visible, kind of stuck to the outside of buildings. So I'm going to get rid of them. And the easiest way, I think, to get rid of something like this is to draw a selection around them and either go image, edit fill, or do Shift F5. Content aware, and when you do that, they magically just vanish. Content aware is pretty much like Photoshop magic. So Shift F5 again, doesn't really matter if you've still got the old selection done, it'll just kind of fill it in a bit more. Let's do these lot. Shift F5, they vanish, and these guys. Shift F5. This lone person here. And if this works like it did earlier, it's going to not only get rid of that person, but still leave the actual railing. Yeah, it did that. I mean, it's a bit wonky just there, but even though content-aware fill's been in Photoshop, I think now for nearly 10 years, I still get kind of... I'm still impressed with how it works. Okay, so we got rid of all the people. So we want to lay some of this texture onto our building. There's no direct sunlight as well here, really. I mean, what we might be able to do is we might be able to hint that because this building is so big, we might add in some sort of glinting sunlight to the top. That might be quite nice. But first of all, let's deal with adding some texture in. So this is fairly straightforward. We're going to select the portion of the image we want to use for the texture. Like that. We're going to copy it, Control C, and we're going to paste it straight into there. I'm just going to rename this detail. No, texture detail. And the first thing I want to do as well is I want to make this black and white. So I'm going to desaturate it. You can obviously go to Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation, but again, if you get used to the shortcuts, then you'll work quicker, you'll work faster and better. Control U will do that. Just take the saturation down to nothing. Now I'm going to sort of position it and distort it into place. Control T is Freeform Transform. I'm going to rotate it around, and the perspective is completely wrong here, but I'm going to distort it so the perspective is roughly right. It doesn't have to be exact because it's in the far distance and it doesn't matter. So what I did there was I did Control T to go into Freeform Transformation, and then I right clicked and went to Distort. So Distort lets you, well in this case, undistort the image. So I'm going to get it roughly into place. Like this. Don't want to fill up necessarily all of it because I'm going to use some more texture to fill up the rest. Just want some interesting. What this will do is, this is going to be the equivalent, if we were doing this ourselves without texture, once we generated that silhouette of the building, we would go in, select a darker colour and start painting in some detail. What this is going to do, this is just going to give us that extra detail kind of for free. So once this is roughly in place, press enter and there it is. Now there's a bunch of things you can do now, because I only want this texture to show up where the building is. I don't want it to show up where the sky is. But because our building is on a separate layer and it's got transparent pixels, we can use that to cut out the rest of this stuff. So what you can do is you can hold down Control and click your texture that you've just done, that you've just added. There you can see it's selected. Now if you hold down Control, Alt and Shift and you select, or you tap into the thumbnail of the structured sort of base that you made, it'll sort of intersect it. Hang on, it hasn't done it quite how I wanted it to do it. Hold on. Okay, oh, I think I know why, yeah. Okay, so let's go back, select that, Control, Alt, Shift, select the structured base. And I've copied it by mistake, hold on. Control, Alt, Shift, tap. It's done it again. Oh well, this was working before. What we can do is we can just erase out where it isn't. So what?
Alt-click in between the layers, like the line.
I don't want a clipping mask though.
Oh,
I know. What I want to do is you can get selections to sort of almost have a Boolean kind of relationship. You can intersect them and have the difference where selections happen. But we can just do this. I'll show you it later. It works a similar thing with the textured detail we're going to paint in, and that should work. But to make this work, often overlay or soft light are fairly good options for this kind of thing because they're quite subtle. So we'll use soft light, it's a little bit more subtle. And I'm just going to erase out where I don't want the texture. Like that. So we've got some texture beginning to show up in our building. We might not want it at full detail, so yeah, that was it, sort of at 100%. I want it quite subtle, I want it quite knocked back, just so you get a hint of it. Something a bit like that. Let's load up the oil refinery. Okay, I'm going to do a similar kind of thing. Actually, no, maybe I want to take a bit more of this first before I start using the oil refinery. So I'm going to deselect that, select a different part, maybe this part just here. Control C to copy, Control paste to paste this in, Control T to go to Freeform Transformation. Let's kind of shift this into space. Maybe we might try and suggest a bit of perspective going on. That would be a bit difficult with this sort of segment. But first things first though, let's undistort it. Something like that. And get it back to a sort of size that we want. Maybe something like that. And I'm going to, again, desaturate it. Apply it as a soft light. And knock the opacity down. Maybe not as much. And then erase where I don't want it to be. I'm just going to put a little bit of pressure sensitivity on this one because I want to soften the edge here. I'll make it completely hard. But already I'm quite liking this kind of darker shadow line that's appearing down the length of the building. I think we can make that work and do something for us. Okay, and this time I'll go to the oil refinery and I will select a promising looking bit. I'm going to select this bit down here. I'm going to Control C to copy it. Again, paste it on, shrink it down, and I think I'm going to have this as the base of my building. Make it slightly transparent so I can see where that's going to go. Yeah, quite like these kind of spherical bits down the bottom. That might work quite nicely. Let's get that back up to there. Okay, Control U. Let's see if I can get that. So if I select that. Oh yeah, it's working this time. Control Shift I lets me chop out everything that isn't part of the original silhouette of the building. Okay, so this goes to soft light maybe. Let's hide those marching ants. And again, let's move that down. Yeah, I quite like this. This looks like it's got some kind of reason for sort of being there. But I want to put something a little bit flatter just here. So I'm probably going to go back to my aircraft carrier and I'll select just a blanker kind of panel part of it this time. Control C, Control V, and Control T to transform it. I'll definitely need to distort this. Something like that. Shrink it down. I'm going to put it down onto this section. Just here, I think. And yeah, first of all, actually remember to make that black and white. And try overlay. Control select that, Control Alt Shift select the main structure layer, Control Shift I to invert, and try delete it. That's on. Oh. Ah, there we go, it's gone. Right. Deselect that, and I just want to knock that down in opacity again. But then on this one, I want to subtract where it's overlapping. So I'll just go to here, get rid of that. So bring that back like that. And let's just get rid of it where it sort of overlaps. Okay. Now I want to show you how you can do this technique where you can sort of use detail from a photo and use that as a selection that you can then paint into. It's a bit of a strange concept, so it's better to just show you, I suppose. So first thing I want to do, I want to grab a useful looking portion of this image. So I'm going to go for this bit just here. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to put it into a new channel that I'm going to make. Now this is going to be called alpha, but we're not really going to use it as an alpha. All we're going to use it for is a place to sort of temporarily store texture detail. So I'm going to copy that into there. So this exists as an alpha channel for our image, but we're not going to use it as an alpha channel. I'm going to make this a little bit more high contrast. I'm going to do Control L for levels and sort of make it high contrast, because I'm going to be using this just to sort of suggest lots of hidden sort of techie kind of details. So something like that. Deselect that. Now if you don't know, when you control click a layer, you'll select only the non-transparent parts of that layer. If you do the same thing on a channel, it'll do a similar thing, but where it's white, it will say that's full opacity, and where it's black, it will say that's fully transparent. And then all the layers in between will be captured in that selection. So if you control click that alpha channel that we made, we now have this busy kind of noisy selection. If we go back to RGB, we can see our selection here, and it's still there, and so we can turn that into a quick selection by clicking here. See our quick selection here. Now we can transform our quick selection as if it were any other kind of part of an image. So I'm going to position this and rescale it and put it over our futuristic building till I'm about happy like that. That looks good. So press return. I'm going to turn it back from being a quick mask selection into our normal selection. I don't want to paint on that, so I'm going to hide by Control H, hide all those little sort of marching ants. And now with a textured brush, I'm going to select one of the colours here, one of the sort of shadow colours, and when I paint into this, you're going to start to see some detail appear back. That's a bit too light. I want it darker. Oh, I just better make sure I'm on the right layer as well. Right, I'm painting in soft light. I'm going to paint in a new layer. And just select these colours. Make sure I'm selecting from all channels. Yep. Now I can sort of paint detail in to the image, only using the selection. So I can swap and change colours and paint that detail in to the building. It's a bit high contrast at the moment, but I'm going to knock that back a bit later anyway by adding in some extra sort of haze. And I can continue to just sample directly from the plate and kind of scribble and scroll over it. But because I'm only painting into those kind of those sort of high detail layers, I get some nice details kind of emerging. Some of this detail's creeping out into this, but I don't really mind. That looks quite nice. Might use it as an excuse just to paint in some more layers like that. Okay, so done that. Let's do some more on this side and try and suggest some perspective kind of going on. Right, I'll do it again with the aircraft carrier. Same technique. I'm going to select a bit of the aircraft carrier, maybe just this part. I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste it into this sort of alpha channel that we made. And I'm going to change the levels of it so it's nice and high contrast. Like that. And I will select all the transparency of this alpha channel, but then invert select that because I don't want any of that stuff. I only want this detail here. So that's the selection. Back up to RGB. There's the selection again. Quick mask, and now I'm going to transform this into position as well. And this one, yeah, this one I'm going to sort of fake a bit of perspective on it by using distort. Right. So just so that some of these panels and these details here, specifically here, look like they're working in perspective and should work quite nicely. Okay, something like that. That'll do. Back out of Quick Mask. There's the selection. And with that selected, I'm going to do that trick. Well, hopefully this will work. The Control, Alt, Shift. Nope, didn't work that time. It's getting darker. Not good. Layer order. Let's copy it. Okay, oh, let's see if it's the mouse. Works better. Yeah, works better. So I think it's the Wacom. Right, so we've got this selection in place. And let's go back to our brush tool. Set to brush. Kind of suggest this kind of line here. In fact, actually, I might go the other way. I might suggest that it's a bit lighter. So that it's a bit of sunlight catching the top of this. I'm very likely brushing in the kind of direction of the perspective as well. Okay. Right. I'm aware of the time. So I want to put some lights in it now. I'll show you how to do some lights. Let's load up the city image. See, this is very easy to find. If you find lots and lots of images of cities at night, you can use this stuff. You can use the lights directly in here as lights in your own kind of bits of art that you're doing. And this is a lot easier in some ways. So I'm going to grab this section of lights. I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to paste it into here. And you want to be aware, I'm just going to turn snap off actually, that you don't want, it's all about scale, so you want these lights to be very, very little. And what I found is lights tend to look nicer when you place them in shadowed areas of any kind of building that you're making. So I'm going to place it down this kind of sort of trench kind of area just here. One thing I want to do is use levels to sort of contrast this up a lot so that the lights are super bright pinpricks of light, but the darks are very, very black. So now if I put this as a linear dodge, it'll add the lights in to this section here. And I might want to bring this down a little bit. I might also want to go in and erase some of these lights, just so they're a little bit less full on. I can just be fairly loose with how I erase these, and there's nothing stopping me from going in and changing the levels again on these lights if I think that they need to be a little bit brighter or a bit more contrastier still. That kind of thing. Okay, let's get some more lights. This one from here. Cut and paste, Control C, Control V, and then Control T. Let's have some... Actually, I wonder what will happen if we rotate this and put this at the base. Shrink this down. Just have these running along the base just here. Control C, Control L to do levels, and clip these so they're very, very bright. And linear dodge. Not so sure. Don't make them as bright. Make them smaller as well. I think the scale's a bit off. It's always tempting to do these lights too big. They should be almost like pixel kind of size at that distance. I'm going to put one more set of lights from here in, and I'm going to show you like a manual way of doing some lights as well. Use this bit, paste it over into here. Oops. That'll do. Okay, cool. That's looking not too bad. Right. I just want to now show you how to do... Sometimes you want to do little sort of spotlights, little pools of light. Because if this is some massive mega structure building, it might have little sort of spotlights that shine upwards. So the way we can do that is, first of all, let's make our own brush to do this. We want a fairly small document. Let's have 32 by 32. Zoom in on this and make a marquee selection that's a sort of window kind of shape or something like that. Oh, one thing, I don't want to have any feathering on this anymore. I just want it to be completely crisp. Let's fill that with black, and then we'll crop around it. Once like that, just shave a little bit off here and a bit here and crop that. Now I'm going to turn that into a brush by selecting all, edit, define brush preset, OK. Let's go back into here and select that brush that we just made. We're going to use this as a light. So we can individually place lights if we want to. I'm also going to rotate it, this brush, around and select color. So I'm going to place a light. I'll just do a couple. What I want is it to be quite bright, to stick out. So I'm going to draw the light source. And on a new layer, I'm going to draw a sort of little sort of pattern of where the light sort of gets thrown up from, where it kind of gets cast upwards onto the building, which is kind of like an upside down triangle. And I want a gradient. I'm going to fill this with a gradient that's going to kind of be that brightish kind of colour. Close to white, I think. So that kind of creates the light being thrown upwards. Deselect that. And then filter, blur it. So it ends up looking like a little sort of spotlight. So you've got the little light source there throwing a bit of light up onto the building. So you can kind of dot those kind of things around your building to kind of make it, you know, throw a bit of interest onto it. Now what I want to do, I want to knock all this back a bit. I'm going to select my original structure. Which for some reason is showing up wrong. Hold on. Well, what I want to do is get a nice airbrush. And then with pressure sensitivity on, I'm going to select some of this sort of atmosphere and lightly brush over it again, just to sort of help blend it in. Same with the top. Just to knock it back a little bit. And then you can create a new layer, and to sort out the base, you can just begin to sort of blend this together by sampling from where it connects to the ground. Kind of just smooth that in. And also, with this new layer now, what can be nice, you've done all of this using just shapes and not much in the way of actual painting, so to speak. So what can be nice is once you've got to, say, this point, there's nothing stopping you from creating a new layer. Now you can sample all those colours and all that detail and stuff, and just sort of now start scribbling over the edge, or just adding details in kind of general, just to make it a little bit less crisp. You can also sort of carve off bits of it as well. And yeah, so you can just work around this to your heart's content. Right, so that's about 40 minutes. Obviously, the longer you spend on something like this, the better it's going to look. And so, but at the same time, I think it's a fairly straightforward kind of process, and it's going to come in useful when you start adding in details and things like that to your finished kind of paintings. So I thought I'd just share this kind of process. Right, let's stop the recording now.